The war in Ukraine shows no signs of ending. The US-China tariff conflict continues to intensify, and most recently, the Israel-Iran confrontation has escalated dramatically. Many observers see this period as the onset of an era of geopolitical and economic instability. So, with this kind of backdrop, in this session, we'll discuss how to deal with these global difficulties, more specifically, how to manage geopolitical and geoeconomic challenges in East Asia. For the discussion, we invited four panelists, very well-known person. I'd like to introduce, first of all, Kim Hyun-wook, he's a good friend of mine, and he's currently president of Sejong Institute, and also he's a professor at Korean National Diplomatic Academy, KNDA, and he's a well-known American specialist. Please welcome him with big hands. Second panelist will be Zach Cooper. He's a senior fellow at American Enterprise Institute, AEI. He accumulated a variety of working experience in Washington, D.C. area and clear-minded analyst based in D.C. And personally, whenever I go to Washington, D.C., he's the first person I meet because I got the guideline from him and the atmosphere of the Washington, D.C. he explained to me. And he just published a book, The Tide and Fortune, The Rise and Decline of Great Militaries. This is a very good book. I'm just reading the first part of it. It's very good. So I think in his book, he said that how will the United States and China evolve militarily in the years ahead. That's a very important issue. So please welcome him with big hands. Third panelist will be Dokuchi Hideshi. He is president of Research Institute for Peace and Security, RIPS. And he used to be Japan's first ever Vice Minister of Defense for International Affairs in 2014. And he will tell us about the Japan's military and the defense policies vis-a-vis Korea and East Asia. Welcome him with big hands. Finally, Professor Yu Yong-wook. He's professor of international politics at Lee Kuan Yew School of Public Policy, National University of Singapore. He specializes in international relations with a focus on East Asia. I think I have known him several years, but he's a very diverse experience. He had education in New Zealand, Australia, and in the United States, and he's covered many East Asian countries, including Korea, Japan, China, and Southeast Asian countries. So he will deliver. We don't have any Chinese participants, so he will talk on behalf of China today. Please welcome him. We have a limited time of 7 minutes. So, and I believe the most important role of a chair is time management. So, I'd like to give each panelist, actually every panelist, they just provide a talking point. So based on talking points, they are supposed to talking 7 minutes for initial presentation. And then I'd like to go around the second round of questions. I'd like to give you each panelist a question. And the third round would be we'd like to wrap up with one question about regarding Korea's future diplomacy. So I'd like to maybe, you are prepared right now? So let's go with Professor Kim Hyun-wook first. You have 7 minutes.
Thank you, President for introducing panelists. I'm very honored to have this chance to talk about Trump 2.0, not 2.0, and South Korea's new government, how South Korea, US can coordinate a lot of difficult issues and agenda in the future. I think several months, about half a year have passed since the inauguration of Trump government. And it seems like three groups or three pathways or branches of policies are underway. I think first one is definitely the Make America Great Again group. The SNS influencer Laura Loomer in we know she's very influential in controlling and influencing President Trump's policies. I think this group is pretty much geared towards a restraining policies of U.S. Foreign policy style and strong and hawkish immigration policies, and wants Trump government to be very hawkish. So that's first group. We know what she's doing. She has been firing a lot of people within the National Security Council of the United States. Second group, I think, is fiscal people. Very hawkish people like Peter Navarro and Robert Lighthizer, and also someone who is now controlling pretty much about the tariff policies and fiscal policies of the Trump government, who is Scott Bessent, have been competing each other. But I think it's getting pretty much focused on Scott Bessent's, policy implementations under the President Trump. He's the one who is trying to be rational and trying to look at some movements within the United States about equity markets and bond markets, and not just trying to be hawkish on China, but trying to balance between the U.S. domestic economic situations and policies there. So I think fiscal hawkish is pretty much, I guess, fading away a little bit, and fiscal dealing like Scott is in power. Another group I think is China prioritizers, like defense people and military people, pretty much focused around the Edward Colby, who is well known about the military operational issues rather than Secretary of Defense. So these groups are pretty much focused on China issues and Taiwan continuous issues, and these groups are controlling the military transformations of the U.S. forces abroad with the U.S. forces in Korea. So what happened in the early period of this year is the publication, not publications, but the leaking of interim national defense and strategic guidance of the United States, which he have put very clearly that the U.S. security policies and military policies priorities China, Taiwan continuity, and some local or regional threats like Russia, Iran, and North Korea have to be dealt or managed by the allies rather than the U.S. forces. So this strategic objectives and guidance of U.S. military policies, Trump government's military policy directive, will make a lot of important, operational level, changes. What we saw recently is 5%, defensive budget per GDP agreed at the, NATO summit meeting. I think that will happen in Korea and in Japan. I'm not sure what percentage conflict will be determined bilaterally, but I think that there should be definitely pressures by the United States on allies like Japan, South Korea, and even Taiwan to raise its defensive budget per GDP. So what kinds of issues and agenda do we have? Some tasks also about the allocated US alliance. First thing is that two summits, President Lee Jae-myung and President Trump should meet as early as possible. You know that Laura Loomer, mentioned about some pro-China government perceptions about the Lee Jae-myung government. I think there is a very big perception gap in the USA and South Korea. I think all we need and removing those wrong perceptions and coordinations about important issues is something we have to do. Important thing is harmonizing threat perceptions. The US is looking at the China threat. The South Korea wants to look at North Korea still. So there should be a lot of coordinations and harmonizing work about their diversity of threat perceptions. And there are some of the strategic objectives there. Another thing I think is maybe we have to think about China we know that some of the strategic interests or strategic value that South Korea has maintained about our relationship with China has been twofold, I think. The first one is that maybe China have to do something to denuclearize North Korea, which I don't think was very fruitful. Second is that China was an important trade partner for South Korea. Gave us a lot of hugely important markets, and low labor costs within China gave us good chances to manufacture our goods within China. Yeah. So would all these chances and interests and values that China gave to South Korea still the same as before? I think that's what we have to think about. Last thing is that once we get to dealing and talking and discussing about important issues, it should not be only the Make America great. It should also be Make Korea great again. So that two countries can continue our productive relationships in the near future. Thank you very much.
Just to keep time, maybe very good. And I'd like to go for Jack Cooper, and you have 37 minutes too.
Great. Thank you, President Han. It's wonderful to be here. It's great to be in Seoul. I have to say it feels a little bit more comfortable this year than most because our politics in Washington look more and more like domestic politics in Korea, which may not be a good thing, but I'm really happy to be here. I want to build on what Professor Kim was just talking about and note two real difficult tensions in the U.S.-Korea relationship. And I want to be clear, I'm a supporter of U.S.-Korea alliance issues, and I think we have to overcome these issues. But first, the U.S.-Korea trade relationship is going to be difficult. And this is true in part because of President Trump's approach on trade issues. He's very confrontational, he's not very predictable, and this is clearly his top priority going forward in the U.S.-Korea relationship. And so, unlike the Biden administration, which prioritized the U.S.-Korea security relationship, now we have a Trump administration which is prioritizing the U.S.-Korea trade relationship and tariffs and all of the challenges that come with that. That is a major change in our alliance, and I think it's going to be something that's going to be incredibly difficult over the next 4 years. The other change is really about our security relationship. And the way I would characterize this is that we are at risk of decoupling in terms of security because the Trump administration has concluded that the most important issue that we should focus on is China. And they've also concluded that South Korea is not that relevant to their efforts to balance against China. And I think this explains why when Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth went to the Shangri-La dialogue a few weeks ago, he said that there were 3 core allies in Asia. It was Japan, Australia, and the Philippines, not South Korea. And there's this view in Washington, which I think is very dangerous, that in fact South Korea is not relevant to the top US priority in the region, which is China, and that perhaps even the Lee Jae-myung government is misaligned with the US on China issues. And the more that that view gets reinforced, the more it will trigger the Trump administration to withdraw some of the prioritization it puts on Korea and some of the support. So what would that look like in practice? I'm just going to list 5 things and then I'll yield back my time. The first, I'm very concerned about the potential for a troop withdrawal from the Korean Peninsula by the United States. I think this discussion about withdrawing a striker brigade, which would be about 4,500 people, is very serious, and Seoul needs to take it seriously. Second, We've already seen the Trump administration call for European allies to spend 5% of gross domestic product on defense. I think we're seeing that that will be the approach in Asia as well, and that will have big implications for Korea, not just in terms of Korea's domestic spending levels, but the special measures agreement that we're probably going to end up renegotiating in the next few years. Third, strategic flexibility. This is something that the Trump administration cares deeply about. They want to ensure that American forces in Korea can be useful in a China contingency. And this is clearly going to be a stressful set of conversations between Seoul and Washington. Fourth, there will be an expectation from the Trump administration that Korea do more on the China issue. I think that will be true on issues including export controls, including security issues. And the Lee government's going to have to make some difficult choices, I think, about how they approach this. And then fifth and finally, I'm worried that there will be a perception in Korea that the bilateral alliance is just no longer as important as it used to be to the United States. So if you'd ask most American experts on Asia a few years ago who the top US allies were in Asia, the answer would probably come back: Japan, Korea, Australia, maybe in that order. It is really dangerous that you now, if you were to ask that question to the Trump administration, I think you might hear Japan, Australia, the Philippines. Somebody might put India, which is not a treaty ally, in that list pretty high up, and then Korea. And that is incredibly risky, I think, and it increases the possibility of decoupling of the alliance. So how can we avoid this? I'll just say two thoughts and then hand it back. So first, I think it is incredibly important that we have senior level engagement between the two governments. I'm not so convinced that it is effective to have that engagement at the president level. It may be necessary politically, but my experience watching President Trump is that he seldom makes issues better. He often makes them worse. I think the best leader that we've seen deal with President Trump was probably Japanese Prime Minister Ishida, and he had a very good first meeting, but it doesn't seem like anything positive really came out of that other than a good first agenda. And so I would actually focus on a very early 2+2 meeting between the foreign and defense ministers of the two countries, where the work can be done harder. And then last, and then I'll hand it back. So I think when we work on issues together, we have to do it in a bilateral, coordinated way. And this is really a critique about the United States. I think the Trump administration's instinct is to be unilateral, but it would be incredibly dangerous if the Lee administration followed that same instinct as well. Thanks.
Thank you very much, sir. Next will be President Toguchi.
Well,
You have 7 minutes.
Yeah, Dr. Han, I prepared a PowerPoint presentation and send it to the organizer, but can I use them? If it's not usable, then it's okay without, I'll do that without PowerPoint presentation. I'm just asking. I'm not eligible to answer this question. Okay, then I'll do my own presentation without.
Yes, please.
Okay. Okay. All right. 여러분 안녕하십니까? 오늘은 이렇게 중요한 한반도 심포지움에 초대해 주셔서 대단히 감사합니다. Time is very much limited. I'd like to cover mainly 2 points. First of all, problems of Trump administration from my own personal perspective, and then secondly, I'd like to discuss somewhat about how to deal with the problems from the viewpoint of US allies. Well, actually, the Trump administration is fickle and erratic and unprincipled. It militates against US interests, and there are at least 5 problems. First of all, globalization. does have its bright side and dark side, and minimizing the dark side and maximizing the bright side should be the policy that the Trump administration is doing exactly the opposite. That's the problem. And he doesn't believe in, for example, comparative advantage or creative destruction. Secondly, he is damaging American democracy by challenging the principle of separation of powers and the principle of the rule of law. And the concept of the rules-based international order is modeled after the Western style of democracy and the Anglo-American legal culture. If the U.S. constitutional system of checks and balance doesn't work and American democracy erodes, it will directly affect the credibility of the rules-based international order. And in this context, Trump's political use of the military causes a problem too. But time is very much limited. I'd like to skip this part. And thirdly, the Trump administration shows its territorial ambition. And even without denying the possibility of use of force. And in the past, that territorial ambition generated trust on the United States for many years, but it is not the case any longer. What Trump says may be just a bluff, but such an intimidating approach is viewed as an act to try to alter the status quo by force and coercion, which is very similar to the approach of China and Russia. And fourth, bullying American allies in Europe weakens trust on American commitment to alliances in general. East Asians feel very uneasy, even though the Americans call the Indo-Pacific the priority region. And finally, decrease of American traction. The United States is not as attractive as before. Then, who are benefiting from this terrible situation? The answer is very, very clear. However, it is very certain about the following 3 points about U.S. approach to East Asia, Indo-Pacific, in security terms. First of all, the Indo-Pacific is the priority region for the United States. And second, America first doesn't mean America alone. And third, more burden sharing by U.S. allies. And these 3 points are very clearly stated in the remarks by Defense Secretary Hayes in the Shangri-La dialogue. Of course, he didn't forget to say in the conference that sometimes with tough love, but love nonetheless. Then, what should we do in order to address this terrible situation? It is well-known fact that Americans often make mistakes, actually terrible mistakes sometimes, but they always come back by correcting themselves. So that's the resilience of the United States. So it is wrong to ignore the American power of course correction. Of course, it's quite debatable right now, but if we were too pessimistic, it would become self-realized. Therefore, we have to be very careful. So I have 5 points as follows for policy recommendations. First of all, U.S. extended deterrence must be made more credible. Our security couldn't be achieved without U.S. nuclear umbrella, as we neighbor, actually Korea and Japan, neighbor on 3 nuclear countries. And also, U.S. presence in Korea and Japan is a great asset for us and for the entire region. There are no alternatives on these points. And actually, U.S. forces Korea is very, very important because it is the only U.S. military presence in the Asian part of the continent. So without U.S. force presence on Korea, there is no permanent U.S. military presence in the continent. That will create big vacuum, I think. Secondly, do not abandon the United States, but keep it engaged in the world affairs. So unilaterals should be strengthened. We must capitalize on the U.S. commitment to the trilateral partnership of Japan, Korea, U.S., and also the vision for a free and open Indo-Pacific as shown in the joint leaders' declaration made by Japan's Prime Minister Ishida and Donald Trump in February this year. And third, the partnerships of like-minded countries other than the United States must be strengthened. Sense of community, sense of common threat perception, and habit of cooperation is rapidly growing in this region. So it is high time for the regional countries to work closely. So in that context, Korea-Japan bilateral partnership is very, very important. And fourth, public diplomacy to the American society is more important than ever. The American public takes a positive view of alliances, and majorities of the Americans continue to recognize the importance of both alliances and superior military power. So it is very important to value such voices in the United States. And finally, allies, of course including Japan and Korea, must assume greater roles for their own national security and also for regional and international security. It is not for the sake of responding to the tough love of the United States, but for the sake of our own national interest in this dangerous world at this juncture.
Thank you very much. You keep the time very tight. Thank you. And next will be Dr. Yu. You have 7 minutes too.
Okay, I want to begin by thanking the organizers for inviting me to this very important symposium to share my views on how the Chinese government perceives and assesses Trump 2.0. So let's start with the basics. China understands that the US-China bilateral relationship has changed fundamentally in its nature, and the US adopts containment policy towards China. So whether it's a Republican administration or Democratic administration in Washington, D.C., they may differ on the method of containment, but they share the same goal of containing China. And therefore, China expects the same containment policy to continue during Trump 2.0. How does Chinese government perceive Trump 2.0? Here, their perception is heavily influenced by their experience with Trump 1.0. And there are a number of lessons the Chinese government has learned from that previous experience. First, sugarcoating and improving personal ties with Trump and people close to Trump will not necessarily help Chinese cause. So if you remember, during Trump 1.0, Ivanka Trump was went to Shanghai to open her clothing business, whatever, right, to earn some favors from Trump. That didn't work, right? So Chinese government learned that lesson. They also think that Trump is quite erratic. He can change his words anytime. Therefore, focus on his actions, not words. So whatever Trump says, Chinese government wants to see concrete policies and actual offer being made from the United States. At the same time, the Chinese government has learned that it needs to demonstrate retaliatory capability and capacity to show China's resolve and strength. And we've seen this when, during Trump 2.0, when tariffs were imposed on Beijing. Beijing retaliated with export controls on raw materials and critical minerals. And lastly, enhance China's partnership with other countries, especially Global South, and seize strategic opportunities when they arise. And this includes US allies. So if you remember, under Xi Jinping's leadership, China has expanded greatly into Global South. So you take BRICS, right? And how should we understand BRICS? Well, that's gathering the representative country from different parts of the non-Western world and forming a group. So there's Brazil, there's India, there's Russia, Indonesia decided to join, BRICS last year, early this year. Iran, Middle Eastern countries are represented in BRICS. That's Chinese way of expanding and setting up its own counter international system. At the same time, Shanghai Cooperation Organization, SCO, that has also expanded greatly. And that's focused on that particular part of the world, but it's also bringing anti-US or Western countries together under Chinese leadership. So that has been Chinese strategy. What's going to be the trajectory of US-China relationship during Trump 2.0? I think there will be some similarities and differences. We've already seen some differences. During Trump 1.0, Trump took some time to build up pressure on China. Right? So there was in the initial period, the Chinese government was very hopeful that some sort of deal could be struck with Trump. That never happened. Right? Pressure continued to build up. During Trump 2.0, Trump came out with very strong pressure in the initial period. And I think this actually reflects recognition on the part of Trump 2.0 that they don't have enough time, right, to weaken China. So they're putting pressure, right, on China right from the very beginning and see how Chinese government is going to respond. And Trump 2.0 is pretty clear in its demand from China. It wants to address trade imbalances with China. So far, the way Xi Jinping has responded to this is actually in the negative. The Chinese government has continuously invested further in manufacturing capacity, and we hope to see some sort of deal between these two superpowers. What we need to see out of China is China reducing its global manufacturing share and emphasizing domestic consumption so that it can buy more stuff, not only from the USA, from the rest of the world, including other Asian manufacturing countries. Chinese government is not taking that strategy, and I think there are domestic reasons why that is so. China will continue to adopt tit-for-tat strategy. Here the purpose is not to escalate conflict with the USA, but to respond proportionally, right, to the measures coming from the USA to show China's strength and resolve. Let me finish up with two factors that we need to pay attention as to understand how this bilateral relationship will develop during Trump 2.0. There are global factors that we need to pay attention. How US negotiates with other countries will significantly affect how USA will approach China. So if its tariff negotiations with Germany, European allies, or Asian partners goes well, then US will be in a position to put pressure on Beijing more strongly. What China will understand from the proxy conflicts that we are having, right, in Ukraine and Iran, that's also going to be important, and they will have a lot of important implications for the way China thinks about, right, approaching China issue. Right? So Xi Jinping has not given up that political goal of unifying Taiwan. What he learns from these two proxy conflicts in Ukraine and Iran will actually have implications for how China approaches Taiwan issue. There's also domestic issues facing Xi Jinping. Here I will just mention two. One is economic situation, right, in China. When pretty much everywhere is struggling with inflation, China is in deflation, right? And it's really struggling to get out of, right, deflationary situation. Severe unemployment, right? We all know that the Chinese government has stopped producing unemployment figures, right? And those issues hurt Xi Jinping's political standing. And here I don't want to speculate, but what I want to say is I think there are signs that suggest that power contest has begun in China. There are people who are willing to challenge Xi Jinping, and Xi Jinping does not seem to control the People's Liberation Army, and that is a critical factor for how Xi Jinping can pursue his policy domestically and externally. I'll stop.
Thank you, Dr. Liu. For half an hour, we just listened to these four panelists comment, and then they have prepared their own talking points. I summarized that the previous three the experts, Dr. Kim, Dr. Cooper, and Dr. Doguchi, the three people you just analyzed for 6 months of Trump's second 2.0, the Washington atmosphere, and what will be the risk and what's going on there. And then Professor Liu, you just analyzed what will be the future of U.S.-China confrontation, and then you just more focused on China's domestic situation vis-a-vis the United States. So with this kind of backdrop, I'd like to go into the second round. And in the second round, I'd like to ask you a question. Each panelist a specific question. I think it's related to the geopolitical and then East Asian related issues. First of all, Director Kim, I'd like to ask you about North Korea issue. In June 4, his inauguration speech, President Lee explicitly pledged for dialogue with North Korea. So he said that to open channels for communication with North Korea, alongside reinforcing alliance-based deterrence. President Trump also stated in January 2025 to reach out to Kim Jong-un again. That's highlighting his plan to engage once more with North Korea. So in this context, how do you evaluate Prof. Kim? Any possibilities of another engagement in North Korea? How do you expect that? If so, who will lead, in what context, and what will be the co-relationship between US and Korea? So, and what will be the North Korean response? Those kind of things you just briefly summarize with 5 minutes. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Looking at what Trump's doing about the Iran issues and Ukraine issues, I think he's not just trying to make things, concluded in a complete perfect way. The way he sees fires, he makes things have, close up, wars calm down, just all temporary. He's not really interested in a complete war-ending agreement or something. So I think that would be the way I think he's trying to solve the North Korea issues, I think. And also the situation is different from the Hanoi Hanoi deal in 2019. At that time, the Trump hosted Kim Jong-un and requested a declaration and dismantlement of Yongbyon and other facilities and nuclear sites. And in response, the US would relieve the sanctions for North Korea. But now things have changed. North Korea is now, I think, fourth de facto nuclear state, I would say. And I can imagine maybe this is not easy if we want to imagine any kinds of denuclearization deal between US and India or US and Pakistan. I think Kim Jong-un would think that way. North Korea is already a nuclear state, that's what Kim Jong-un would think. And why denuclearize North Korea? Kim Jong-un would not easily accept that kinds of proposal by President Trump, even though there are a lot of incentives given to Kim Jong-un. And also, North Korea is now within the bloc of so-called axis of evil. Iran, North Korea, Russia, and China. They are forming another bloc, and North Korea-China relationship, North Korea-Russia relationship is very solid. Doesn't really need such a necessity to open a dialogue with Trump for a lot of urgent incentives. And also, I think if Kim Jong-un dismantles its nuclear weapons, that's destroying all the security-related policies of Kim Jong-un towards the United States. What North Korea wants, Kim Jong-un wants, is to make the solid second strike nuclear capabilities, in response to any chances or opportunities that the U.S. attacks North Korea with conventional or nuclear weapons. North Korea is not the same as Iran. Iran just have initial facilities of nuclear development, but now North Korea has full-fledged nuclear warheads and missiles with its second strike, third strike capabilities, which Kim Jong-un thinks is very important for its own security. So I think if there's any possibility for a deal making between North Korea and the United States, that will not be the North Korea denuclearization. That will not be the arms reduction. Maybe arms control. North Korea and the US will talk and what to do about its level of nuclear weapons, level of long-range missiles, how to manage it, keep it and freeze so that North Korea would not use it anymore. And response, the US can give something to North Korea. But I don't think denuclearization, even though the policy of denuclearization is maintained by the United States, realistically, they will not be accepted by North Korea.
Thank you. I'd like to ask one question.